And Ben had to do this with Caleb to some degree. He'd been beaten up, lost some confidence. What did you do in the first 3 weeks, 4 weeks with Trevor? Because the ascension was noticeable very quickly. What in the hell did you do?
Colin, thanks for having me on, man. Really appreciate it. A ton of respect for you in this program. Trevor was so cool to work with at an early point because of the humility you talked about, of being able to say, man, I do want to break this thing down. I'd like to change my footwork in the shotgun. He was always a right foot forward guy. I ended up wanting to go left foot forward. That was his idea. That was something that I was comfortable with after working with Matthew and Baker. And we started there, Colin. He wasn't able to throw for a long time during spring because of a shoulder surgery. So we were able to really start from the ground up, really start with the footwork, start to work with the playbook, the protections, the schemes from the neck up without worrying about the result of a completion. Right? Like, we're just worrying about your footwork and your thought process, going through the cycle of the snap without worrying about the throw. And then, okay, get into training camp. Now we're getting closer. And it did. It took some time. We were able to run the football effectively early in the season, which helped us win games. And Trevor managed the game at a high level. And then once, the pass game took off, he brought us to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I love that he emphasized manage the game at a high level. And I talk about that all the time, how you need to be able to manage games. And that's something that I think Trevor also really grew into. We can talk about all the touchdowns. We can talk about the footwork. We can talk about this, that, and the third. But he also just became a significantly better manager. And I've said this a billion times. In order to be a truly elite quarterback, you got to be an elite game manager. Like, that's actually your foundation. That's actually your foundation to be an elite manager. That is the foundation of any truly special quarterback. It's not the scrambling. It's not the big back shoulder fade throw. Like, it's so much more than just that. Those things are all important too and necessary and all that fun stuff. And they're obviously really great to watch, but you got to be able to manage. Honestly, clears throat. I'm so excited for what the Jags have going. And I think sometimes when you have a team like the Jags, who I don't want to say came out of nowhere because you had like a Trevor Lawrence, or you kind of had that wait and then you made a great hire in Liam Cohen. So I don't want to say that came out of nowhere. Because I discussed that last off season about, what my expectations were for Trevor and Liam Cohen, specifically. But I do think the NFL is littered with teams that kind of pop a little bit and then, not much comes from it moving forward. You're just kind of like, oh, that was a good season that they had. I feel like the Jags have had a season like that before, and it just not much came from it. 10 years ago, you felt like maybe you were going to win a Super Bowl or had chance to do it. In 2017 or whatever, and then it didn't happen, and it just wasn't even close ever again. And I just think that this team has so much to build off of, and there's such a runway, and it's so snorts much not because of the guy holding the football, but because of Liam Cohen. And I'm just such a firm believer that when you have that coach as the foundation of your team, oh man, that's just how you really create something special. That's really how you can have the sustainability. That's how you can not be so reliant on a snorts specific running back, a specific wide receiver, a specific left tack. You just have so much more freedom to work with combined now with a great quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who then hopefully you are lockstep with become an extension of. And then now you're just like, all right, it just puts you in such a strong position and a consistent position to be great and more resilient to. We got to move on from so-and-so because the dude wants $50 million a year. We're not doing that. You know what? Whatever the story may be, or he's getting surgery. And so I just see right now that what we saw this past season out of the Jags was really just a glimpse of what this team will be. I see no reason why the Jags won't solidify themselves as one of the main, if we look at the last, I don't know what, 7-8 years or whatever the exact timeline is. It's like we just knew the Bills, the Ravens, the 49ers, the Chiefs, the Eagles. You just knew year after year after year. Those are teams that when you got to play them in the playoffs, you're not thrown about it. You're not excited about it. You're not like, oh, good, it's Geno Smith and the Seahawks. Okay, I'd love that matchup. Like you're like, oh man, got to get past the Bills right now. Like it's tough. The Jags just could not got past the Bills, right? So you know how tough it is. You know, you're just like would have loved to play a different team, and I see no reason why they don't solidify themselves as that team. And again, to be fair now, like we're in a new transition, which who knows now what those teams are. I can't say that that's necessarily who the 49ers are right now or who the Bills or the Ravens are. Like I just meant like in terms of using that as a reference point of what had been. I don't know what's going to be with in terms of all the teams right now. But I don't see why the Jags don't enter play that role essentially as those other teams did for the next 4 year. You know, it's hard to ever come up with an exact timeline, but the next 3, 4, 5 years, I just don't see any reason why they're not consistently that top team where you're just like, yeah, man, you're hoping Trevor makes that mistake. You're hoping so and so is banged up going into that game in January, right? Like because you're just like, man, if this team's playing at their best, if they're fully healthy, like you better hope that you have the right defensive coordinator or defensive coach to be able to try to keep up or slow down Liam Cohen and Trevor. You know, you better hope you have the right OC, the right offensive coach, and the right quarterback who can keep up, you know? And it's like, if you don't have those things, it's tough sledding, man. It's tough sledding, and then you are in one of those situations where you're like, you really want home field advantage for this game because I think Trevor won't be as good in the cold weather the way how this team has been playing, you know, like all those other things that you're really kind of like, all right, it would probably be favorable if it was really windy because that takes away some of the stuff that Trevor, you know, like you have to start to really twist things a little bit more, which is what you do with the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, etc. over those years. You're really trying to be like, you know, this team is really high-howered right now, but like Brockport is not the best in rain, so hopefully it rains. You know, I would love home field advantage, so it's really cold right now. You know, we can run the ball, and it forces the 49ers to play in a way that they, you know, whatever it may be. And so I just, I don't really do a lot of like coach interviews, honestly. I really don't, because you get a lot of generic stuff. I mean, let's be serious here. I talk a lot about the Chargers, for instance, and like, I don't know, Harbaugh's been on a handful of times. I don't know if I've ever have done a Harbaugh because it's just like, what are you going to say? Justin Herbert, he's a great quarterback. And, oh man, does that kid like to work hard? And I'm like, yeah, he loves to work hard and that's great. You want a quarterback who likes to work hard? That's really important. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. But I'm just such a massive fan and believer in Liam Cohen to just the maximum degree. Just to the absolute maximum degree. And when you look at some of the teams that fired coaches this run, the Giants, the Bills, the Ravens, trying to think of anyone else off the top of my head immediately, it's like Liam Cohen was the hirer. You fired your coach a year too late. You fired him a year too late. The Eagles, in a way, winning the Super Bowl was obviously great for them, and, you know, no one can take that away from them. But it was like, if they lose or they just don't make the Super Bowl, it's like, Liam Cohen was the hirer. Liam Cohen was the hirer, right? You go out and get Liam Cohen. And so the Jags got him. The Jags got him. And I just think it ushers in a new era for the Jags. And I think people have not wrapped their head around it, quite frankly, because we're still having more conversations about the Giants, the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs. And again, a lot of those teams deserve it, right? They deserve it because of what they've been able to achieve, what their quarterbacks have been able to achieve, you know. And I so like it. It makes sense in a large degree, but the Jags need to become a regular talking point. They need to become a regular talking point, which is why I'm out here making a Jacksonville Jaguars video on the week of the Super Bowl. You know, like I take pride in and try my best to actually talk about the teams that not everyone's talking about and whatnot. And that, you know, that does mean, you know, I want to be able to deliver that honestly, but it's just so it can be tricky, especially during this time, because not a lot of people want to watch anything. And not to mention some of the smaller teams like the Jags, it's like, well, you know, 5% of a little is really low relative to 5% of a lot if it's the Bills or something. but I want to be able to get in such a steady rhythm of being able to just, of being able to make content and cover these teams in such a more consistent, reliable way to really like that. That's going to be something. And I'm not entirely sure how it'll all unfold, but this winter and spring, and it might be hard because, again, making videos with these smaller teams, smaller market teams during the months when no one's really around, I've talked about this with Jags fans, that it's hard enough even when things are through the roof and everything's peak, let alone when people are admittingly I'm not watching football content right now. The season's over and I need a break, which I totally get and respect. But I want to see if there's just a more reliable, more consistent way to do this, because again, even a clip like this is just very much it's Super Bowl week. There's not a lot to talk to. Colin has the ability to interview Liam Cohen, and that's it. If he wasn't interviewing Liam Cohen, he's not talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so I'm just trying to figure out the best way to go about it. But I do find that it's interesting that a lot of these postseason, now I don't mean like post the season, so not postseason in terms of playoffs, but postseason, post 2025 season, it's interesting to see what teams kind of carry that momentum. And it's been the usual suspects. It's been the Bills. It's been the Eagles. They've been and it makes sense. I get it. I do. But I'm trying to emphasize, I'm trying to plant the flag that the Jags deserve a lot of that momentum too. And there's a potential handful of interesting moves that they could make, that they could make to really have a massive amount of football momentum now. Not narrative momentum, but football momentum going into this next season, And I'm just fascinated to see how aggressive they are with all of it, because if you're looking at windows and whatnot, I always like to put teams only these 2 to 3 year windows. Not saying that the window is closed, but that's just a timeline that I look at teams where I'm okay, starting from this point on, the goal is to win a Super Bowl within the next 3 years. And it doesn't mean that after that 3 years that the window's closed now, but it's just I'm hitting, maybe after that third year, I'm it's a new window. It's a new timeline. I did it with the Eagles, it was they won their Super Bowl in 24, and I'm okay, your goal is to win another Super Bowl within the next 3 years now. It's not to go back to back. It's not to win 3 out of 4. It's the next 3 years. What can you do? You 2025, you didn't win. It's now these next 2 years, right? And so that's just kind of what makes sense for me. And I put the Jags on that 3 year window right now, and it's just I think you're right. I think you're right there when you see how the playoffs have all unfolded and the Super Bowl matchup and all of that type. You don't think you could have hung with the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Of course you don't think you could hang with the Seahawks. I mean, quite frankly, in hindsight, listen, I think the Seahawks played awesome in that game, and that was a fun defensive game to witness. They swallowed up Trevor. I mean, obviously it wasn't fun for the Jags, but they swallowed up and pressured Trevor just nonstop. And there was a couple really, really high-level chain of events that I always kind of highlight in my post-game clips that the Seahawks were able to take, that they did, that really led them to a win. But also, in reflection and hindsight, the Jags weren't even playing their best football. Far from it. And yet, they actually hung decently well, they were so far from playing their best version of football, and yet they were still kind of in the mix. And now talking about the Jags actually playing their best football and what that could look like against the Seahawks, I would just be curious to see how aggressive, because you legitimately could be a bounce away, a move away from being the best team in the NFL. And so what does that do from a decision-making perspective? I think it's a little hard, because you have to see who's available all around the league, who's not being signed, who's being franchise tagged, who's up on the trading block, right? All that type of stuff, and continuing to evaluate who you're looking for in the draft, and what other dominoes may fall within that draft, who ends up trading their pick. And now you're oh well, I didn't think so, and so was going to get a quarterback. But now that that pick got traded to that team, like, oh, now there's a good reason to believe that they're, so there's so many other dominoes that still need to fall to even have a strong sense of what the realistic moves are. But yeah, I'm just fascinated to see what they do. And I think what they do in the offseason will give you all the answers you need to know of how close they feel that they are to winning a Super Bowl. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Jacksonville Jaguars? The evolution of Trevor Lawrence, as well as his connection with Liam Cohen. Let me know your thoughts. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get to some discussions. Let's get to some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all generally feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much.